ලයිෆ්බොයි ෂැම්පූල ඇති කිරි ප්‍රෝටින් සහ මල්ටිවිටමින් හිසකෙස් මුල සිට පෝෂණය කර ශක්තිමත් කරයි.
From zero to hero, in a stunning political comeback, UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe gets sworn in as the country's new Prime Minister. Going nowhere, the former PM and several close political confidants get slapped with an international travel ban. Off the streets, the island-wide curfew is to be reimposed at 2 p.m. tomorrow and to be lifted on Saturday morning. Tall order. The CPC limits diesel distribution to essential services only and promises to reduce supply issues in the next 2 to 3 days. All this and much more coming up tonight, this Thursday, the 12th of May 2022.
Introducing New Hellmann's, the world's #1 mayonnaise brand, now in Sri Lanka.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a very warm welcome. Joining you tonight on First at 9, I'm Indivari Amuat. It seems that initial steps have been taken towards sorting out one of the country's two crises, the political crisis. After much speculation since President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's national address last night and promises to form a new government within a week, United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe took oath this evening as the island's new premier. Speaking to media shortly after taking oath as the country's premier, Ranil Wickremesinghe said he accepted the president's invitation by choosing to deliver solutions over practicing petty politics.
United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe took oaths as Prime Minister this evening before President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Colombo. This is Wickremesinghe's sixth time at the head of a Sri Lankan government. His appointment comes on the back of extensive talks held yesterday with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa ahead of the president's address to the nation at 9 p.m. last night. During the president's speech, he promised to install a new government and a prime minister before the week was out.
ලොකු මේ අමාරු තත්ත්වයක ඔබතුමාගාව ජනතාවගේ විශ්වාසය දිනා ගන්න මොකක් හරි සැලසුමක් තියෙනවද මේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය?
මේ ආර්ථිකය ගොඩ ගන්න ඕනේ. මිනිස්සු අමාරුවෙන් ජීවත් වෙන්නේ. ඊළඟ මාස කිව්වේ මීටත් වඩා අමාරු වෙනවා. ඒත් අපි මේකෙන් ගොඩ එන්න ඕනේ. ඒ ගොඩ එන්න තමයි මම බාරගන්නේ ඒ වැඩ කටයුතු කරලා දෙන්න. අපිට මේක තනියම කරන්න බෑ. අනිත් රටවල් වල IMF වල ආදාන ඒ තාපව 3 වේලක් කරන જાතියක් වෙන්න ඕනේ. රුපියලට වටිනාකමක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. තරුණයන්ට අනාගතයක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ.
කැබිනට් මණ්ඩල හිට පත් කිරීමක් කරනවද කරවද
නෑ හිට කරන්නේ
කවද්ද මේක කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ
හිතලා බලලා කියන්න
අගමැතිතුම අරගලයට මොකද වෙන්නේ අරගලයට
අරගලිය ගෙනියනවා අපි කිව්වා ගෝටාගෝ ගමට අත ගහන්නේ නෑ ඒක ගෙනියන්න ඕනේ පොලිසියත් කරන්නේ නෑ මොකොත් අරගලිය ගෙනියන්න
මේ බහුතරයක් මේකට විසඳුමක් හම්බෙයිද
පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුළ කොහොමද බහුතරය පෙන්වන්නේ මම එතන විදිහ දැන් රාජ්‍ය පාසයෙන් ඔබතුමාට බහුතරය ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන කතාවද ඔබතුමා ඔය නොකිය කියන්නේ
නෑ මට තියෙන දෙපැත්තේ බහුතරය
ඒ කියන්නේ සමගි ජන බලවේගයේ පැත්තෙන්ද නැත්නම්
මම ඔබෙන් අහන්නේ මේ රටේ අද මිනිස්සු දුක් විඳින එක නවත්තන්න ඕනද නැද්ද කියලා ඔබතුමා කියන්නේ නෑ මේ පටු දේශපාලනය කරන්න 3 වේලක් කන්න බැරි වුණත් කමන්නේ අපිට පෙට්‍රෝල් නැති වුණත් කමන්නේ අපිට ඩීසල් නැති වුණත් කමන්නේ අපිට විදුලි බලය නැති වුණත් කමන්නේ මම කියන්නේ මම මේව අරගෙන දෙනවා පක්ෂ සීළු දෙනාගෙම පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ සීළු දෙනාගෙම සහයෝගය ඇතුව.
The main opposition Samagi Jana Balavegaya meanwhile took a step back from its demands for the president to resign immediately for its leader Sajith Premadasa to take on the premiership. The list of demands came after news broke that UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe was to be sworn in as Prime Minister this evening. Meanwhile, SJB's MP Harin Fernando announced his intention to sit as an independent parliamentarian and support the new government.
The million-dollar question on the minds of many Sri Lankans remains, who will make up the 113 seats in parliament? Already, Samagi Janabalawegaya parliamentarian Harin Fernando signalled his intentions after last night's SJB Working Committee meeting, announcing that he would be leaving the party as he did not see eye to eye with the lethargy of its working committee.
මම පෞද්ගලිකව විශ්වාස කරන්නේ මේ විදියට රටේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙන මොහොතේ අපි යම් යම් කැපකිරීම් කරලා මේ වෙලාවේ මේක බාර ගන්න ඕනේ කියන එකයි මගේ පෞද්ගලික මතය. මගේ උත්සාහය නම් මේ රටේ මේ අත්දලා තියෙන තත්ත්වය අනුව අපිට තව විනාඩියක්වත් නාස්ති කරන්න හැකියාවක් නැහැ. මේ සියලු දේත් එක්ක මම ස්වාධීන වෙලා එන කණ්ඩායමක් එක්ක මේ රට වෙනුවෙන් වැඩ කළා මට රාජ්‍ය ඡන්දය ඉල්ලුවත් එකයි එන තත්ත්වයකයි.
With the president having already held talks with SJB leader Sajid Premadasa on Tuesday, shortly after Premadasa refused an invitation to form a government, his party's stance has been rigid that he would not form a government under President Rajapaksa. His main condition for accepting the helm of government was an immediate resignation of the executive president, explaining that this was what the people demanded. His main condition for accepting the helm of government was an immediate resignation of the executive president, explaining that this was what the people demanded. However, following news of talks between the president and Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday, the Samagi Janabalawegaya decided to soften its stance. Out of 4 new conditions sent in a letter to the president today for forming a government, the issue of a presidential resignation had been given a deadline and was no longer an immediate requirement. The other 3 conditions were the implementation of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, bringing about the 21st Amendment to abolish the executive presidency, and agreeing on a date for a general election to cement a government mandate. Meanwhile, SJB MP Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca, who was also asked by the president to accept the premiership, stated that he would not accept any positions under a Rajapaksa presidency. He stressed that he would not be a part of resolving the Rajapaksa crisis without a discussion with the Golface Green protesters. With that, Sri Lanka Freedom Party leader Maithripala Sirisena says that names for possible PM candidates proposed at a meeting of the 11 independent parties yesterday are yet to reach the president. The independent group had proposed Nimal Siripala de Silva, Dallas Alaperuma and President's Council Vijay Dasa Rajapaksa as their choices for the post. Meanwhile, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna-led National People's Power yesterday released 4 short-term proposals to immediately restore political stability in the country. This included allowing the party to appoint an interim government, stating that the NPP was ready to be responsible for solving the political crisis in parliament. The party also demanded that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resign immediately, and in the absence of a current Prime Minister, Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena should act as the caretaker president. They also proposed a new government be formed within 6 months with a new mandate through an election. Furthermore, the MPP said that an advisory body with oversight should be appointed to oversee the functioning of the interim government as well. In the meantime, at the party leaders' meeting held today, a decision has been taken to convene Parliament on Tuesday the 17th of this month to take up the debate on the motion expressing displeasure against the President following a special approval by the House.
Meanwhile, Venerable Omalpe Sobithathera and Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, expressed their displeasure ahead of the swearing-in of UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe as Prime Minister. Speaking at a media briefing today, the Cardinal urged the President to heed the calls of the chief prelates of the main Buddhist sects and instead choose a non-partisan candidate.
Chief Sanganayaka of the Sri Lanka Amarapura sect, Venerable Omalpe Sobithathera and Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, have expressed condemnation of appointment of UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe as the country's Prime Minister. The 2 clergymen say that the President's decision was contrary to the wishes of the people and demanded that the President go with the advice of the country's chief Buddhist prelates to appoint a non-partisan individual to bring about a system change. The Cardinal emphasized that the President must listen to the chief prelates who are the country's true leaders.
On this occasion, I wish to express our dissatisfaction about the decision that has been made or is reported to have been made by the President to appoint Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe as Prime Minister of a new cabinet. Mr. Wickremesinghe is only one representative of Parliament. He represents a party, but there are no members of that party in Parliament. According to the Constitution, he doesn't command the majority in Parliament. So this appointment is not legal, and also this is not the solution that the people in this country want at this moment. The people in this country want a person of reputed integrity, not a person who has been defeated in politics, who has been thrown out of power by the people. The Mahanayaka Theras suggested a non-partisan person. What has happened to that suggestion is everybody's guess. If this country is to move forward from the present crisis, we need a complete change of this system. And that can happen not through the leaders of the present parliament parties, but somebody who is not a partisan person. The Mahanayaka Theras have made that request to the President, and we expect the President to honor that request and to respect the voice of the clergy, very especially of the Buddhist clergy, who are the leaders of this country. We want to endorse completely that request and require that this swearing-in ceremony not be moved forward at this moment.
Travel bans were meanwhile imposed on former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and other SLPP MPs and supporters by the Fort Magistrate today after a request was made by the Attorney General's office on behalf of the Criminal Investigations Department. The request was made in connection with CID investigations into the attacks by SLPP-linked mobs on peaceful protesters on Monday.
The Fort Magistrates Court has today imposed a travel ban on former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, MPs Namal Rajapaksa, Johnston Fernando, Sanat Nishanda and 13 others ahead of investigations into the incidents near the Temple Trees and Golface on the 9th of May. The travel ban was imposed by the Colombo Fort Magistrate Tilina Gamage after taking a request made by Additional Solicitor General Ayesha Jinasena, who appeared on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. MPs Pavitra Vanyarachi, Sanjeev Edrimanna, Kanchana Jayaratna, Rohita Begunawardana, CB Ratnayaka, Sampath Atakorala and Milko Chairman Renuka Pereira, SLPP activist Mahinda Kandegama and Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tendukun are also among the officials who have been barred from overseas travel. Meanwhile, the travel ban was also extended to 7 eyewitnesses who were at the scene. The magistrate ordered that the Controller General of Immigration and Immigration be immediately informed of the relevant travel ban and called for the passports of all those named to be surrendered into the custody of the court.
Details on the investigations into the mob attacks on Monday after this short break.
Big 3.
Now, Sri Lankans were able to enjoy a 7-hour curfew-free period today from 7 a.m. until 2 p.m. in order to restock on household essentials. However, the curfew, which was scheduled to be lifted at 6 a.m. tomorrow, will instead be lifted at 7 a.m. and reimposed at 2 p.m. and be lifted at 6 a.m. on Saturday, the 14th of May. Meanwhile, the curfew, which was imposed to restore peace and prevent violent acts, did not discourage or prevent the expression of public dissent at the Gota Go Home village that marked its 34th day today.
An island-wide curfew that was imposed on Monday the 9th of May as means of curtailing the violence that followed the resignation of former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa was lifted at 7 a.m. and reimposed at 2 p.m. today. The 7-hour window during which the curfew was lifted gave people a chance to move about and restock their households with required essentials. With the curfew lifted and the streets bustling with people, private bus owners and the Sri Lanka Transport Board deployed buses to transport people over short distances. Despite the SLTB deployment for long distances, there was a noticeable shortage of buses to meet the long-distance travel requirements due to the lack of diesel. Due to this, some commuters who travelled to bus stops to journey between districts were severely inconvenienced over the limited number of buses in operation. Similarly, even though it was announced that some trains would operate today during the 7 hours that the curfew was lifted, there were no trains to be seen. Most train operators had decided not to report to work today. As such, the General Manager of the Railways Department, Dhammika Jayasundara, said that only fuel transport trains were expected to operate during the day. Meanwhile, amidst the ongoing island-wide curfew, the protest at the Golface Green continues. The protest at the Gota Go Gama marked its 34th straight day today, and 3 days after the peaceful protest was attacked by pro-government supporters. Many people made their way to the Gota Go Gama last night as well, despite the curfew order preventing people from being on public roads, railways, public parks public recreation grounds, or even the beaches without a curfew pass. In the meantime, even though many schools in the Western Province and other provinces and districts were closed, some schools were functional. However, student and teacher attendance was very low. In other developments, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa issued an extraordinary gazette yesterday, appointing Special Grade Officer KDS Ruwan Chandra as the Commissioner General of Essential Services. As such, Commissioner General Ruwan Chandra will be tasked with executing and coordinating all activities relating to the supply and maintenance of essential services with immediate effect. Nevertheless, the island-wide curfew will be lifted at 6 am tomorrow and reimposed at 2 pm on the same day, while it is due to be lifted at 6 am on Saturday, the 14th of May.
Police said today that it will take measures to prosecute the administrators of 59 WhatsApp groups that incited violence on Monday at the Golface Green. The police are also calling on the public to provide any information about the violence on Monday via hotlines 1997 and 118. Meanwhile, the Fort Magistrate ordered the 3 suspects arrested for attacking senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennakoon on Monday to be remanded until the 19th of this month and to be presented for an identification parade.
On the 10th of May, senior DIG of the Western Province Deshabandhu Tennakoon was attacked by a group of people at Gangaramaya. The senior police officer was attacked for his alleged complicity in the Golface protest attacks on Monday, with footage showing the senior DIG supposedly in discussion with Puttalama district parliamentarian Sanath Nishantha. However, the police managed to arrest 3 suspects in connection with the incident and produce them before the Fort Magistrate Tirana Gamage today. During the proceedings, the Fort Magistrate had ordered the suspects to be produced before an identification parade today. However, the Kolpeti police informed the court today that the chief witness to the incident, the driver of the police vehicle, was still receiving treatment at the police hospital. Further, the Kolpeti police also informed the Fort Magistrate that the other witnesses, Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennakoon and SP Dasanayaka, have been instructed by doctors to rest for a few more days before reporting to work. After considering the facts, Magistrate Gamage offered for the suspects to be presented for the identification parade on the 19th of May and to remand the suspects until such time. In the meantime, the last rites of the Polonnaruwa district Sri Lanka People's Front MP Amarakirti Athurkorala was carried out today at the 28th Milepost Cemetery in Polonnaruwa this afternoon. In the meantime, Avendra Hotels and the Grandeza Hotel that was attacked by protesters on the 9th of May have issued official statements on the incidents. In its statement, Avendra Hotel said that it has provided employment opportunities to thousands of staff in the 2 decades it had been in operation. The hotel chain clarified that they had no political affiliations whatsoever and it remained independent throughout its years in operation. In the official statement issued by the Grandeza Hotel, the company stated that it was saddened by the devastation the hotel had to undergo, but nonetheless that it was grateful that none of its team was injured. It stated that while it had made mistakes in the past, it will indefinitely take measures to serve its customers to the best as soon as it's able to get its operations up and running. Meanwhile, suspects who had looted the hotels in Nigambu had voluntarily returned the items that had been stolen to the police station in Katana. In the meantime, the Sri Lanka police announced yesterday that it had begun investigations into 59 WhatsApp group admins who allegedly encouraged the violence on Monday. The police said that such individuals will be prosecuted under the Computer Crime Act and criminal law. Further, they also said that 2 hotlines, 1997 and 118, and the email address telligp@police.gov.lk have been introduced for the public to report on incidents which led to violence on Monday.
The Sri Lanka Petroleum Private Tanker Owners Association said today that the congestion at refilling stations will reduce in the coming days once petrol distribution recommences from tomorrow. However, the association said that due to the limited availability of diesel, it has been decided to issue supplies only for essential services.
Long queues outside refilling stations have been a common sight over the past months. However, the roads were largely clear over the past 2 days as people forced to stay at home due to an island-wide curfew. And today, as soon as the curfew was lifted at 7 am, the long queues outside the refilling stations reformed. The Sri Lanka Petroleum Private Tanker Owners Association said today that 80% of the fuel bowsers had reported to the Muthurajavela and Kolonnama fuel terminals. As such, they stated that fuel distribution will take place island-wide. Joint Secretary of the association D.V. Shanta Silva said that even though there is a limited quantity of diesel stocks available, there are sufficient stocks of petrol. He went on to say that once the distribution of petrol resumes and is carried out in the next 2 to 3 days, the congestion at refilling stations will relax to a great extent. However, he added that due to the limited stock of diesel that is available, it has been decided to issue diesel to essential services only. The secretary of the association also stated that the next consignment of diesel is expected to arrive on Saturday the 14th. In the meantime, Litrogas Lanka Limited stated today that it took measures to issue gas cylinders to the apartments in Colombo under the protection of the police. The company stated that it will take measures to issue gas cylinders continuously required for commercial purpose.
Well, shares jumped over 3% today, with the main all-share price index closing 237.99 points, up at 7,754.62. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks rose 3.83% or 93.59 points to close at 2,536.64. The day's turnover was 1.1 billion rupees, nearly a quarter of this year's average daily turnover of 4.2 billion rupees. Market has gained 1.7% so far in May, following a loss of 14.5% in March and 23% in April. Overall, the market has lost 36.5% so far this year. Foreign investors, in the meantime, sold a net 49 million rupees worth of shares, with market having witnessed a total foreign outflow of 1 billion rupees so far this year. Exports in the month of February this year grew 14.7% year-on-year, recording a 1.92 billion US dollars. In the meantime, the trade deficit has also widened to 781 million US dollars in February, compared to 572 million US dollars recorded in February the previous year.
According to the central bank today, the deficit in the trade account widened to 781 million US dollars in February 2022, compared to 572 million US dollars recorded in February 2021. Meanwhile, the cumulative deficit in the trade account during January to February 2022 widened to 1.64 billion US dollars from 1.22 billion US dollars recorded over the same period in 2021. Further, earnings from merchandise exports in February 2022 grew by 14.7% over February 2021, recording 1.092 billion US dollars. In addition, an increase in earnings was observed in industrial and mineral exports, while a decrease was observed in agricultural exports. Cumulative export earnings, which increased by 16.1% during January to February 2022 over the same period of the last year, amounted to 2.192 billion US dollars. Earnings from the export of industrial goods, meanwhile, increased in February 2022 by 19.4% compared to February 2021. This increase was due to a broad-based increase in earnings from most of the industrial products, led by mainly garments and petroleum products. Agricultural goods in February 2022, however, declined by 2.1% compared to February 2021 due to the decrease in export earnings from tea, spices, and unmanufactured tobacco. Further, the drop in export earnings from tea by 10.4% was mainly due to low export volumes, which declined by 9.1%.
The Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing warned that Sri Lanka risks damage to its long-held reputation as a liberal market country that respects principles of democratic governance from the violence that erupted on Monday and targeting peaceful protesters. It adds that such timely and immediate steps driven by consensus among all concerned is what will help Sri Lanka navigate the challenging transition peacefully and emerge as a resilient nation.
The Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing believes that the sudden eruption of violence witnessed at the beginning of the week could tarnish the long-held reputation of Sri Lanka as a liberal market country that respects principles of democratic governance. It adds that the latest wave of turmoil shows a disturbing trend since the suffering general public are compelled to go through an unprecedented tense situation in the country that impedes their livelihoods and social functioning, thus creating untold difficulties for them, their families and the country. Slim observes that the country is in a transition economically and politically and believes that given the critical nature of this period of time, authorities should manage this phase with utmost care, with due respect to human lives and dignity. Slim adds that such timely and immediate steps driven by consensus among all concerned is what helps Sri Lanka navigate the challenging transition peacefully and emerge as a resilient nation.
Singapore and New Zealand issued travel advisories to their citizens in Sri Lanka, warning them to be vigilant of the ground situation in the country as the protests could turn violent without warning.
Singapore's Ministry of Foreign Affairs advised Singaporeans to defer all non-essential travel to Sri Lanka today after clashes broke out in the country. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs advised Singaporeans in Sri Lanka to exercise vigilance and take all necessary precautions for their personal safety. The minister said that Singaporeans in Sri Lanka are advised to avoid public places where there are protests and large gathering of people. They should also monitor the news closely and heed the instructions of local authorities. The Singaporean foreign minister strongly advised Singaporeans travelling to or in Sri Lanka to purchase comprehensive travel insurance and be familiar with the terms and coverage. In the meantime, the government of New Zealand issued a warning to its citizens today in Sri Lanka. It adds that dire economic conditions have led to shortages of such basic necessities as fuel and certain food products, causing long queues in a range of shops including supermarkets, petrol stations and pharmacies. Local authorities have imposed rationing of electricity which has resulted in lengthy power outages, the New Zealand government warned its citizens. As such, they advised New Zealanders in Sri Lanka to avoid protests, demonstrations, rallies and large crowds, as they have the potential to turn violent with little warning. They called on the New Zealanders to comply with any instructions issued by local authorities, including any curfews, and to monitor local and international media, review personal security plans, and be aware of their surroundings.
US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Julie Chung, taking to Twitter today, expressed her willingness to work with the newly appointed Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ambassador Chung said in a tweet that she looks forward to working with UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe. She added that his appointment as Premier and the quick formation of an inclusive government are first steps to addressing the crisis and promoting stability in the country. Ambassador Julie Chung said that the United States encourages meaningful progress at the IMF and long-term solutions that meet the needs of all Sri Lankans. On to some news overseas. A Palestinian journalist for Al Jazeera has been killed reportedly by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank yesterday while covering the latest Israeli military incursion. Reports say that she was shot in the head while wearing a clearly defined dress or press vest, and the incident has drawn outrage from the governments of Qatar and Palestine.
An Al Jazeera reporter was shot dead during an Israeli raid in the occupied West Bank yesterday, with the news channel and a wounded colleague accusing Israel of killing her. However, as expected, Israel's leader Naftali Bennett says that she may have been hit by Palestinian fire. Shireen Abu Akleh, 51, a Palestinian American, was wearing a press vest when clearly marked as a journalist while reporting in the city of Jenin, the Qatar-based outlet said. She was covering the latest in intensified military incursions in the West Bank, launched amid deadly Arab street attacks in Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett in a statement said that according to information Israel has gathered so far, it appears likely that armed Palestinians who were firing indiscriminately at the time were responsible for the unfortunate death of the journalist. The Palestinian Health Ministry said she had been hit in the head by gunfire. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said Al Jazeera described her death as blatant, cold-blooded, murdered by Israeli forces. Meanwhile, Qatar's Deputy Foreign Minister on Twitter said Qatar condemns in the strongest terms the journalist's assassination by Israeli occupation forces.
The Russian Defense Ministry has revealed more details of US-funded biological weapons labs in Ukraine, reportedly funded by the US Defense Department. A spokesperson for Russia's biological weapons arm of the military revealed that experiments had been conducted on a group of severely malnourished men between the ages of 40 and 60 at a psychiatric hospital.
Russia's Ministry of Defense released further information on activities of biological laboratories in Ukraine funded by the United States at a press conference yesterday. At the press conference, Chief of the Russian Armed Forces Radiation, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces Igor Kirillov revealed that Ukraine is in effect a testing ground for Western countries to develop biological weapon components and test new drugs. Kirillov said the US government is an advocate of military biological activities in Ukraine and has established legislative guarantees for funding such activities through its executive organs. The Russian Defense Ministry also disclosed details of experiments conducted by the US Department of Defense at a psychiatric hospital in Kharkiv, Ukraine. The US experiments involved mainly a group of severely malnourished men between the ages of 40 and 60, the ministry said. In order to cover up the real intentions of the experiments, US experts chose to arrive at the hospital via a third country, the ministry added. During Russia's special military operation, the dangerous biological activities of the US on the territory of Ukraine were revealed. Russia later announced the establishment of 4 working groups to investigate US-controlled biological laboratories, US-controlled biological labs in Ukraine.
And that's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.